having anxiety can bring a certain energy, right? And when we're stressed and anxious, we are much more likely to get angry easily, to get frustrated easily, to lash out. And if we don't respond to anxiety in that way, we can also just spend a lot of time in worry.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to my podcast, Renew Motherhood. And this episode is if you get scared for your teens. And for this topic, I like to welcome Neesha B. And I directly like to hand it over to you. Please briefly introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from?
So my name is Neesha Blajberg, and I live in Vancouver, Canada. And I am an educational consultant and stress and anxiety coach. I specialize in supporting women, teen girls, and their parents. So with teens, I help them develop the skills that they need to navigate adolescence. And with parents, I help them support their teens in navigating through adolescence. And then with women, I help them learn how to manage anxiety and stress and prevent burnout.
That's great. So our topic is about anxiety. I like to get a little deeper inside of how to overcome this. And you're a mom of two teens. What causes anxiety here? What would you say?
Well, I think there are layers to anxiety. I mean, first, as parents, we have anxiety about our kids, right? So we worry about their emotional health. We worry about their mental health. We want to be able to support them as they become more independent, but we also want to protect them. We worry about their safety, their futures, and, even things like who will take care of them if something happens to us, right? So we ourselves as parents have anxiety for our kids. And so then when we have anxiety for our kids, if we don't learn how to manage that anxiety or alleviate that anxiety, then we end up raising kids with anxiety as well. We need to become aware of our anxiety and deal with it so that we can model for our kids how to manage stress and anxiety.
So you would say that even the teens or the kids, well, actually, if they grow up a little, even they can grab our anxiety and place it as their own anxiety?
Well, they can't help but
They copy it?
Well, they can't help but be aware of anxiety. Having anxiety can bring a certain energy, right? And when we're stressed and anxious, we are much more likely to get angry easily, to get frustrated easily, to lash out. And if we don't respond to anxiety in that way, we can also just spend a lot of time in worry. And when we're spending all that time in worry and anxiety ourselves, we're not able to support our kids. So even if they don't end up being very anxious themselves, there are other things that they're going to miss out from us as parents.
Yes. So what is your solution to overcome this? How did you overcome this?
Well, so I don't necessarily think of it as overcoming anxiety because, anxiety is a part of life, right? And so for me, it was more about becoming more aware of what my stressors were. It meant trying to figure out what kind of strategies would work for me to help me manage my stress. I think of stress as sort of being sometimes a gateway to anxiety, because if we don't manage our stress, if we don't know what our stressors are, then it can't help but compound and we can become anxious as well. So we have to become more aware of what is causing our anxiety as well, right? Part of the definition of anxiety is that it's a perceived anticipation of threats in the future. So our perception is really key, right? So we need to be able to separate our perception from reality. And then once we're able to separate perception from reality, then we can also start dealing with the reality. And so that's why I say that you can't necessarily overcome anxiety, because there are always things for us to be anxious about, but we can learn to normalize anxiety, recognize when it is in our body, so that we can figure out or use the tools that we've learned to manage our anxiety and actually manage it, if that makes sense.
Yes, so I think it makes sense, and it's also it's a way how to deal with it, right? To change your perception, to look in the future, to recognize that you're looking in the future, and there is something that causes your emotions that
Mhm.
get up, and you get anxious about something that might be in the future, what
Yes.
you're thinking about, but it might not be the reality, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so anxiety is a normal part of everyday life. And the point at which it becomes a disorder is when it is, for example, chronic. We have it for a long period of time and we're not able to manage it or alleviate it. Or if it is so overwhelming that it shuts us down and we can't function, right? So if we're able to, first of all, if you have the disorder, then you should seek psychological help because there's something going on underneath there and you need to figure it out. But if you're just dealing with regular daily anxiety and you're still functioning and you just want to be able to manage it, then I think one of the most helpful things is to just start with building awareness of what is causing your anxiety. There's somebody reminded me of the phrase the other day, name it to tame it. And I think that's a really useful phrase to have because if we recognize what is causing it and we name it, then we can say, okay, this is what's happening to me right now, and I can deal with it. So for example, my daughters, they're both teens, ones that you just started university, and what causes her anxiety is tests, which is a normal kind of anxiety to have, right? And
Right.
so what I've said to her
And
is
it's
when you're
real.
yes, exactly. It is real. It is exactly. And so what I've said to her is, okay, well, first, you've recognized the fact that you have anxiety about tests. So what can you do about it, right? So once you know what is causing it, then you're able to deal with it, and you can try out different strategies to see what's going to work best for you.
Yeah. So do you think that we are able, if we look at the future, we are looking from our perception, from our standing point. Is there
Mhm.
a way that we can put ourselves out of our box to look from another angle? Do you think we are
Um,
able to do this on our own, or do you think we need something from the outside, or we need someone to help us, or I don't know.
I guess I would say it depends on what kind of anxiety you're experiencing.
Mhm.
Um, if you are able to name it and tame it, then
That's a big step.
maybe you don't need a lot of help, or maybe you just need somebody to help you figure out what kind of strategies can work with you, somebody who can make suggestions, somebody who can listen and help you figure out what you need to do. If it's shut you down, then you probably need more help than a coach can give you, for example, right? But I think that the first step is definitely awareness. It's being able to distinguish perception from reality. It's being able to identify, is it fear that you're aware of? Is there something that you're avoiding that's causing you anxiety, right? And you just haven't really, like, because you don't want to face it, it's hard for you to name it, right?
Mhm.
Like they're all there. It's complex,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. It could just be regular worry.
Yeah. Yes.
But unless you take the time, like, unless you take the time to like sit with whatever you're feeling, like that's one of the first things I would suggest actually is sit with what you're feeling and try to think, okay, what's causing it? Because we're moms a lot of the time. We have all these layers of things that we are dealing with, right? Things that we're preparing for. And sometimes it can be hard to figure out is it the accumulation of layers? Is it all those layers that's
Yeah.
causing our stress and anxiety, or is it just one of those things? And in order to tease it out, sometimes you just need to sit in it for a bit and figure it out, right? And then, or start working on the different things that are there for you to deal with. Because sometimes part of the solution is just starting to solve the
Yeah.
problem, right? And one of the benefits of anxiety, if it hasn't shut you down, is that it is actually there to tell you you have something to deal with. So deal with it.
So here lies the growth.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
It takes a lot of courage sometimes.
It can do. Yeah. Because if it's a fear, or if it's something that we've buried, or if it's something that we're avoiding, then yeah, it can take courage to face what is causing that
Yes.
anxiety. Like I think immediately of something like, I don't know if you've heard this already, but climate anxiety,
Yeah.
right? So if you're suffering from something like climate anxiety, you don't necessarily know that that's what's causing your anxiety, right? You might just have this, oh, this feeling of something dreadful is hanging above your head, and because you haven't taken the time to sit and figure out what it might be, you haven't dealt with it, right?
Yes.
And I think that if you're worried about something like climate change, then you have to decide, first of all, you need to face that. And then you have to decide, okay, what can I, as an individual person, do in the face of what is basically an existential crisis?
Yes. Yes. Would you say that teens nowadays have more anxiety or have to deal with more that causes anxiety?
Well, I think that it's definitely more complex for them, right? I think that,
Because
and
I
yeah,
think climate anxiety is a pretty new one. It's
yeah.
not the old from hundreds of
Hmm.
years ago. So I think something
Hmm.
changes here.
Yeah, well, this generation of teenagers, depending on their age, they have an awareness of things like climate change for sure. We didn't grow up with that. They also had and still have, depending on who you're talking to, an awareness of COVID being
Mhm.
out in the world, right? And they had to live through lockdowns. So I think that they've definitely had unique experiences that would cause anxiety. And then they also have social media to
Mhm.
deal with, right? And yes, there's always been marketing and advertising, but we were able to protect ourselves from it to a certain extent, right? It is so much harder to protect yourself from the marketing and advertising that happens in social media, right? It's everywhere and it can't help but have an impact. And so our kids, to they're socialized in many different ways. And one of the things that's having an influence on them now is how they see themselves on social media and what people are presenting them on social
Mhm.
media. And for parents, it can be particularly hard to decide where to draw a line, to help
Yes,
them to,
that's what I wanted to know. How can we as
yeah.
parents, what can we do? How would you counteract this?
Well, so I think it depends on your relationship with your kids,
Mhm.
right? So I think it's really important for us to, first of all, to work on our relationship with our kids. So if it's hard for us to communicate with them, if we're experiencing challenges that way, then that's one thing, one problem to work on solving.
First.
Yeah, yeah, because it's hard to communicate your concerns about something like social media with a child that you don't have a good relationship with or
Mhm.
that you can't communicate with, right? We need to be able to educate our kids and instead of expecting that somebody else will, right? And so we need to be able to be involved in their use of social media and technology. We can't be afraid of having hard conversations with them. We can't be afraid of making difficult decisions and maybe saying no,
Mhm.
right? And we also need to be able to explain no in a way that is caring and supportive so that they understand why we are making the decisions that we're making.
So which age are we talking about? What would you say?
Well, when they're younger, it's easier to say no and just deal
Mhm.
with whatever tantrum there might be, right? Or like explosion of energy, or when they're older, when they're teens, then that's why it's really important to be able to communicate with them. The social media companies and the platforms, for them, 13
Mhm.
is around the age where kids can have their own account. And so I think that, first of all, we need to know ourselves what's involved in these platforms, right?
Mhm.
And then we have to decide how, like at what age we want our kids to be exposed to them
I
and
think
be
it's
on
a
them.
little different here. I think you have got
Okay.
13. I think we have got 16.
Oh, really?
But it depends on the platform, I think. Every kid, every teen
Yeah.
is having their mobile phones.
Yeah.
So they are always on social media. Sometimes I think, okay, as parents, we need to have a look at them, to look after them and
Yes.
to see, okay, what are you
Mhm.
doing here?
Well, I think some platforms have tried to make it possible for parents to be more involved. I'm not sure for some, like for example, Snapchat, I think that can be harder to monitor with your kids. So I think that's why it's especially important to have a good relationship with them so that they're willing to show you what they're doing on those platforms, right?
Yes.
On Instagram, for example, I make sure that I'm friends with my daughter. Only my older daughter's on Instagram right now, so I'm friends with her so I can see what kind of things she's posting, and she's not afraid to talk to me about it. And with the younger one, she has access to one of the platforms, and I just, I think that if you have done a good job or doing a good job in raising your kids, if you've got a connection with them, if you can communicate with them, then you're more likely to be able to have open conversations about your concerns, and then have confidence in your child's ability to make good decisions. But we do also need to keep in mind that their brains are still developing, and that they're not always going to make good decisions. And I think it's good for them to know that as well, right? That part of this is like just developmental, and it's not because we don't necessarily trust them. It's because we also know that they are more likely to be impulsive, that they don't have the life experience we have. But they're only going to accept that from us if we have a good relationship with them.
Yes. So that's the foundation of everything.
Oh, yeah.
Have got a good relationship to your kids. And it's so crucial, I think, and it's so important. And you can see this if they're grown up into teenagers. So, and if it's still good, you can have those open conversations. If it breaks down, you need to fix something here, I think.
Yeah.
First, so that you can really, get into their world again and to analyze something and how you can support them and how you can guide them their way to find out. Because, I think it's difficult to say, okay, I don't like you to be on social media.
Yes. Yeah.
They're immediately out of their society, I think.
Yes. Yes. It's a thing that it's important for us to recognize, because if all of their friends, if all of their peers are on a platform and they're not, then that means that they're not getting the same access to building relationships with other kids, right? Their age. And so we have to be able to recognize that. And if we don't trust them to be safe on whatever platform they're on with their friends, then that's something for us to work on, right? That means that we need to educate them so that they understand what the risks are.
Yes, that's important too, I think. Yeah, I would totally agree. So what would be your number one piece of advice for mothers, how to support their teenagers in the best way?
So I would say that the thing that I'm always reminding myself of is what I said a little bit ago, which is that, if we have a hard time with something at our age and with our experience, then we definitely can't expect things to be easier for our kids, right? So if you find that you're having a hard time detaching yourself from your phone or from your favorite platform, then you need to recognize that it's not going to be easier for your child. It's going to be harder for your child, right? And I think it's also important plus they see that. So if you are trying to teach them to do something that you don't do, then they can call you a hypocrite, right? If not out loud, then in their head. So I think it's important to be able to have that awareness, to remember that their brains are still developing, to not be patronizing, right? Explain to them so that they understand. I know it's hard, so of course it's going to be hard for you too. And then I think it's really important for us to be able to role model the kind of behaviors that we want to see in our kids.
That's great. I think we always have to keep in mind that we are still a role model, right?
Always.
They look at us and see things, and if we talk in another way than we are doing it, it's not congruent, and they can't understand actually what's going on.
So, and they need to be able to tell you as well. Like my kids, they catch me sometimes, doing the opposite of what I say, and they'll let me know in the moment. They said, well, you haven't been doing, this, and oh my God. And then so I have to say, yes, you're right, I haven't. And so I need to work on that.
Yes. So not being afraid to make a mistake. actually, right? We are all human beings, and even as mothers, we have our mistakes. We are not perfect, and we can be grateful that our children recognize this, and if they are able to tell us, can work on this, actually, right? This is a mirror for them too, I think, to see, okay, it's okay to make a mistake and to change it and to make a change here and to see, okay, if I do something wrong, I can still improve in this field and to do it differently and to make it better. So it's a good part.
Yeah, no, I think it's good for them to realize that we're all works in progress, right? That we don't have all the answers and we're still learning and figuring things out ourselves.
Yes, right. Has there been a biggest mistake that you have made on your journey as a mother that other mothers can learn from?
Well, I think that I wish that I had figured out how to manage my stress and anxiety sooner. I was always, you always have an awareness that you are stressed, that you are anxious, but you don't always realize what kind of impact it's having on your kids. And so you may put off dealing with managing your stress and anxiety. And so that's my regret, is that I didn't figure it out sooner, and it couldn't help but have an impact on them. And so, yeah, I wish I'd figured things out sooner, and so that not only so that I could help myself, but so that I could help them, because that's the other thing, right? If they're seeing you struggle with stress and anxiety and it's having a direct impact on them, then first you're going to have to solve it for yourself, and then you need to be able to help them with theirs, right?
Yes. So would you say that, yes, I think it might be difficult to really notice that you are in a stressful situation or that you are stressed. Because if you grow up in this field, you have to become aware of this and to say, no, it's not the normal life. It's the life that I had, but it's not zero line. It's always a little up, and I can calm down here and I can make a change. But sometimes it's difficult to see this if you are so used to live this way, right?
Yes, so, well, when you're living in it, it can be hard to recognize exactly what you're living in.
What can help that you can notice this?
Well, I think that you can help.
It's a kind of awareness that you need, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like it's basically sometimes people have to reach I think like a bit of a breaking point, or sometimes people say, well, I found myself yelling at my kids and they were scared of me, right? You can reach a point, and then in that moment, that's the time to sit with that recognition.
Really say, okay, what happened? Why did I do this?
Yeah, because they're innocent, right? And we're parents for a reason. And so if we're taking out our stress and anxiety on our kids, then I think that's the moment to sort of like pull yourself together and say, this is not okay, and I need to come up with a plan and seek help, right? Whether that's if you've gone too far and you feel like you're causing damage, then it's probably a good idea to talk to some sort of psychologist or psychotherapist. If you are already starting to work on it and you just need help figuring out what are the best strategies, you don't want to be searching all over the place looking for different strategies, then you can connect with somebody like me, like a coach like yourself, and start trying the different strategies that exist that can help you start to manage yourself.
Okay, if you make a change and look at the children, the teens in this situation, if you start yelling at your children, how would you deal with them in this situation? Or what's your suggestion for a mother who just flipped out, and because this might cause a little damage in them too, in those kids, and
so I think that's when if that kind of thing happens and you recognize it in the moment and you have it in you to apologize and to explain what you're going through, I think that that can be a first step. But you can't just keep doing it and apologizing, right? You can't get into that cycle. You actually need to start to do something about it. If you have the self-awareness to realize that your kids are getting the brunt of whatever you're going through, then you need to seek help before things get worse, right? I would also say that one of the things that I teach is to have self-compassion, right? Because life is hard. We all experience stress and anxiety. It's a normal part of life, and and we're not alone in that experience.
Yes.
Right. So it's important to also have self-compassion and to realize that we're all learning all the time, and then come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Right. Because the other thing is that one of the things that we tell ourselves sometimes is that kids are resilient. Kids are naturally resilient, but they're not actually. If you look at the research, kids are not naturally resilient. They build resilience if they have a supportive family, a supportive network, right? They don't develop it on their own. So that idea that they're naturally resilient is just so wrong. And it's something that we need to counteract and explain to people. They need caring people that they can turn to when they're struggling, caring adults, right? We don't want them to turn to their peers for support with things that we need to be providing guidance on, right? So we can't help them develop resilience if we're not working on our own.
Yeah.
And so we can't have a warm, caring, supportive relationship with our child if we're in a cycle of stress, anxiety, yelling, frustration, all those kinds of things, right? That's if you don't get support for yourself, then do it for your kids, right? Do it for your kids. Remember that they're innocent, they're developing, and you don't want to have a negative impact on their, on their emotional and mental development.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So what is it that you specifically offer? You are offering coaching programs or coaching, one-on-one coaching, or what is it?
So I have a lot of different things that I can do to help folks. So I offer coaching services that range from like a one-time clarity session to a 4-session or 8-session coaching package. So I can work with parents. I also work with teens. Are
you working at the same time with the teens, or is this different?
It would depend on the situation, right? I think it would. So, I also do family consults. So I'm happy to organize something like that where we have a chance to talk about some of the challenges and decide if perhaps, is coaching right for them, or is there some other sort of support they need to access first. I also have a program for teen girls in particular, because I find teen girls and teen boys are socialized differently. My expertise is more in the teen girl area, as having 2 teens myself, 2 teen girls. And we talk about the challenges of adolescence. They learn about social norms and they learn about the influences that they're being exposed to. We talk about values because it's really, really hard to know what your own values are if you're constantly exposed to the values of others. So we talk about their values, their family values. We talk about the values that are influencing them, that they see all around them. And we talk about effective ways of making decisions and setting goals. I help them become aware of their strengths so that they can develop their confidence. And then the self-compassion, I find that teens, especially teen girls, are really hard on themselves. They're socialized to be perfect, to please everybody, to not question authority, to follow the rules. So we shouldn't be surprised when they have a hard time making decisions and a hard time setting goals, because everybody has been busy telling them who they are and what they should do, right? So yes, I have a program specifically around helping teen girls with some of those challenges.
That's great. So where can people find you and reach out to you? Do you have a website? Are you on social media?
Yeah, I have a website. It's Neesha B Coaching, Neesha, Neesha B Coaching.
Great.
.com. And folks can
That's the
sign
best
up.
way to get in contact with
Yeah,
you.
it is. It's the easiest way. I send out a newsletter occasionally, so you can sign up for my newsletter. I sometimes offer free workshops. So the best way to hear about those are through my newsletter. I am also on LinkedIn and Instagram, not as often, but you can follow me there. I'm also Neesha B Coaching on LinkedIn and Neesha B Coaching on Instagram.
Great. Thank you very much for being my guest and sharing your knowledge and your experiences around anxiety and anxiety with kids, with teens. And I think this is so valuable to talk about how parents and teens can get together again, especially in this topic, in this field of being anxious about different things and the foundation to keep the foundation of the relationship, right?
Yeah, it's so important. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it because it's a subject that I'm really passionate about and it's so important
Yes.
for the health of our teens.
Thank you for being my guest. And to all the listeners, stay tuned, subscribe this channel, Renew Motherhood, and follow my episode.